Hello, how are you? Today I'm going to tell you an extremely important trick to help you control your insulin in the morning. This will help you control your blood sugar, lose weight, and be healthier. This tip is very important, not just for people living with diabetes. You're going to love this video. Stick around until the end, you won't want to miss this. Before we start, I want to ask you, how old are you? Have you noticed that as the years go by, as time passes, you've been finding it harder to lose weight, to control your weight? Sometimes you even lose weight, but then you gain it all back again. To control your blood sugar? How long ago did this start happening to you? Write to me here in the comments and tell me where you're from. I love knowing which city you're in. Take advantage of the start of the video and go ahead and leave your like. This is really important to me, not just for this video, but it also shows YouTube that you are someone who supports my channel, that you trust my content, and that's essential. Let's start talking about insulin, this hormone that is so important for our health, for weight control, for metabolism regulation, and for managing our blood sugar. And why do we need to be extra careful with our insulin in the morning? Insulin is a hormone produced by our pancreas, and it works kind of like a lock, right? Imagine that our cell has a lock and it needs a little key to open the door of this cell so that glucose can enter. It's more or less as if insulin were this key. It attaches to the cell wall and signals that the cell can receive this glucose, that glucose can enter to generate energy for the processes we need in our daily lives. But when there is an excess of insulin in our body, it ends up having a negative effect, which is blocking fat breakdown. Insulin is an anabolic hormone, so it will stop our lipolysis, it will stop our fat breakdown. This is very important for keeping our body weight within healthy standards. In other words, to help you understand better, when we constantly produce a lot of insulin, our body can't access the fat that's already stored. Your energy gets trapped inside the fat cell, you feel hungrier, and this vicious cycle keeps repeating itself. But that doesn't mean calories don't matter. No. Calories still matter, but the way and the timing of when you eat can increase or decrease your body's insulin secretion and sensitivity. I'm going to explain more about this to you right now. Several scientific studies have already shown that there are factors that change our insulin secretion throughout the day. Sleep, stress, and of course, diet, right? And the very time of day itself can change insulin secretion as this hormone varies greatly throughout the day. And when we think about early in the morning, there's still another issue that happens to everyone called the dawn phenomenon, which can make this situation worse, meaning we need to be more careful with what we eat and do right in the morning. Because this dawn phenomenon is closely related to the secretion of certain specific hormones, such as insulin, cortisol, adrenaline, and even growth hormone itself. They peak early in the morning, but why does this peak happen? This ends up happening because our bodies were programmed back when we still lived by hunting and gathering. And when the first rays of sunlight started to appear, we would wake up, right? No one had blackout curtains or a pillow to put over their face. Back then, you really lived that way, right? In a nomadic, gathering, hunting culture, where you needed, in the morning, to have that burst of energy, that spike in stress. Let's put it that way. In order to get your body moving and look for food, there was no refrigerator, no microwave, no stored or stocked food. So, our bodies were programmed to have this spike of stress, this burst of energy in the morning, so you could go hunt, gather, survive, wake up. Animals would come after you, and you had to survive. So, this was an evolutionary maneuver that our bodies ended up developing as a species so that we could have this extra energy first thing in the morning. Now let's come back to our current moment where we have a lot of conveniences, right? Like I said, we live in a house, right? If all goes well, everyone has a warm place, there's a bed, a little blanket, a pillow, a curtain you can close. For the vast majority of people, right? You have food in your fridge, in your pantry. You don't have that worry of first thing in the morning having to provide for your family or having to hunt an animal or pick a plant to feed yourself. So theoretically, we wouldn't even need this evolutionary maneuver so much with such high peaks of cortisol, insulin, and other hormones, adrenaline, right in the morning. What happens is that this still keeps happening, right? Our bodies continue to secrete these hormones. So early in the morning, our blood sugar does tend to be a bit higher, and we have a slight insulin resistance. If you are diabetic, this definitely gets worse and it becomes harder to control this hormone. But even if you are not diabetic, this also happens to you. And it's important for you to know what to consume, what to do at this time, to minimize the impact that insulin ends up having on our bodies first thing in the morning. A very common mistake I see people make and do a lot is waking up and still half asleep, they go over, turn on the coffee maker, put the water on to boil. So the first thing people do when they wake up is drink coffee right away. And sometimes it's a large amount of coffee because they're already dealing with accumulated fatigue. Things are really hectic. We have a lot of work every day, a lot of stress, a lot of worries. Sometimes your nights of sleep aren't very restorative, so you wake up really tired and you think, I need some coffee. Coffee is going to give me that energy I need. So, the first thing people do in the morning is drink a large amount of coffee. This can actually make things worse because coffee can increase your adrenaline secretion and can also raise your glucose and insulin levels, though only temporarily. So what I suggest you do is that you don't need to stop drinking your coffee, but rather wait to have it after your first meal of the day, because that way you'll have given your hormones some time to stabilize a bit. This issue of the timing of your first meal is also something we need to discuss more calmly. What would be ideal if you have more time in the morning for you to include in your routine? Ideally, you should try to avoid going through this spike in cortisol, insulin, and adrenaline, having a significant amount of carbohydrates entering your bloodstream. You already know that these hormones are going to be secreted, so there's no way to change that at this first moment, and this spike in cortisol and insulin, it's going to happen. So, ideally, if you can, you should wait a bit before having your first meal of the day, because it would be beneficial for you to go through this period when you have a large secretion of various hormones without having a significant amount of carbohydrates in your bloodstream. Because think about it, if you go through this spike of insulin, adrenaline, and cortisol, but you don't have a large amount of carbohydrate of glucose in your bloodstream, it won't have an impact on your weight gain or on lipolysis, right? It won't stop your lipolysis because you can't store a carbohydrate, a glucose, that isn't available in your bloodstream. So that's where the tip comes in. You have two very interesting options you can try. If you have time, you can wait about an hour and a half before having your first meal. And I say this because there are people whose morning routine is to wake up, take a shower, already prepare lunch, pack it to take along. They pick out their clothes, do skincare, put on makeup, do their hair. So, if you can do all that before eating, you'll already have some time to wait for that hormone secretion to happen. And remember to have your black coffee only after all of that, okay? You might be thinking, I don't have that kind of time. I wake up and my time is really tight because I don't work from home, or I don't wake up that early, or I have a job. And my job is very far away. I spend a lot of time commuting, and by the time I get to work, I can't afford to wait. So ideally, you should eat as little carbohydrate as possible in that meal. Because then, even if you have that spike in insulin, cortisol, and adrenaline, the amount of carbohydrate entering your system will be small. This doesn't mean you necessarily have to fast, but that you should try to reduce the amount of carbohydrates. So focus on protein, healthy fats, and on fiber, right? Which we know is a type of carbohydrate that isn't absorbed and doesn't enter the bloodstream, can be an interesting strategy for you. I'll give you some practical examples here of breakfasts you can start having to try to control that increase in insulin, cortisol, and adrenaline that will end up happening even at breakfast. So, good options for breakfast are eggs. In fact, we already know from scientific studies that people who eat eggs in the morning are able to maintain satiety for longer. Throughout the morning, they don't snack and are able to make it to lunch without that urge to eat a cookie, a cereal bar, or some crackers in the middle of the morning. So eggs are excellent for us to add to our breakfast. Yogurt with some chia seeds, a low glycemic index fruit, and a small amount of carbohydrates could also be a good option for your breakfast. A smoothie with milk that has fewer carbohydrates, such as almond milk, coconut milk, or another plant-based milk with fewer carbs, whey protein, some chia seeds, or oat bran, can be a good option for your breakfast. The idea here is for you to try to consume fewer carbohydrates or to shift your breakfast so that it doesn't coincide with your insulin peak, your cortisol peak, in order to minimize the effects of these hormones on your body. If it's absolutely essential for you to eat some carbohydrates like bread or a fruit with more carbs, remember to combine it with this food. At this time, other foods with lower carbohydrate content and more healthy fats, fiber, and protein, at least to lower the glycemic index. Because this way, you ensure that the carbohydrate will stay longer in your stomach and will enter your intestine and bloodstream more gradually, so it will have less impact. Even if you eat, for example, a slice of toasted bread. And toasting the bread is another good tip to slow down its absorption. Add an egg also at this moment. Try to add, for example, a bit of yogurt with chia seeds. Don't add more sources of carbohydrates and try to add more protein, fiber, healthy fats like avocado mayo or flaxseed mayo. I have many tasty recipes here on the channel that can be a better alternative, for example, than toasted bread with butter and a glass of orange juice that would have a much greater impact on your blood sugar first thing in the morning. Another important point to remember is that cortisol is also closely related to this issue of hormonal imbalance in the morning. And people who sleep poorly have an increase in cortisol, which in turn raises blood sugar, which in turn stimulates insulin. So, managing your sleep, having good quality sleep, sleeping at least 7 or 8 hours a night of restorative sleep will also help you to keep these hormones more controlled in the morning and to manage stress, irritability, and anxiety a bit. I have a playlist here talking more about how to control anxiety naturally. And of course, if this is difficult for you, look for a professional in your city, a psychologist or a psychiatrist, to help you as well. Let me know down below if you knew about this role that our diet, the time we eat in the morning, and even sleep itself have on insulin, in your weight and blood sugar control. What are you going to change in your diet today? Write it for me down below in the comments. I would love to see your comment. Remember to like the video, that helps me a lot, and share this video with someone you know will enjoy it, with someone who needs it. Let's expand this chain of good together. That's what I want here with the channel. See you next time. Bye.